I am so pleased today to have my guest, our good friend Leslie Hausner Montanile at AskLeslieTheLawyer.com. And Leslie had every good intention of being here with us today, but she ran into a little obstacle known as the Merritt Parkway, where the traffic wasn't moving, and dedicated trooper that she is, she retreated to her office in White Plains, and we agreed that we would do the interview remotely because we're burning to get this information out. And first of all, Leslie, you're okay, you're in one piece, everything's together, and that's my major concern.
Well, I'm doing great now that I'm out of the car and talking to you.
That's fantastic. And this subject that we're going to talk about today, which is the 10 questions you should ask before filing for or if you are thinking about divorce. We were chatting earlier this morning, and and this is me, and this is how my mind works. I often look at something and I say, well, what caused it to be as it is now? What was the sequence of events leading up to it? How does a couple, and this is probably a subject for another show or perhaps another 10 shows, how does a couple go from I love you, I love you, I love you, I want to spend my whole life with you and we'll take whatever comes, to I hate your guts and I want to gouge your eyes out?
Well, that's a very good question, and I'm sure we could dedicate many shows to that. I often think that when people do get together and they love each other so much, they have these expectations of how it should be forever. But as we all know, like the Merritt Parkway gets in the way, life gets in the way, and things change. Finances change, families change, illnesses occur, losses of jobs occur, and if you have two people that aren't able to evolve and grow together and meet those changes together, then what often happens is there's discontent on either one side of the fence or both. And a lot of times, finances play a huge role in taking away the joy from a relationship, again, maybe because of expectations that weren't fulfilled, or one partner felt they should have had more than they do have, and they just haven't figured out how to cope. And stay partners. I mean, we all know that we have best friends that, we give and take and we allow them to be who they are. But when it comes to our spouses or our life partners, we're much more critical and much more demanding. So when someone walks through my door, often the first question they ask me is, well, how much money will I get? And, that is the number one question. And I always respond with, well, what do you have? Because, just ask me what you're going to get. I need to know what you have. So I thought about the 10 questions you really should ask yourself first before filing for a divorce, or if you're thinking of one. Because when you go through those 10 questions and really do the exercises, you might find at the end of them, you're not going to jump ship so quickly. And maybe what you had, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, is worth saving by doing a little work. So, going off of that, the very first question that I tell people they need to ask is, how much do you need to live? What are your expenses, and how much money do you really have? How much cash do you have in the bank? How many investments do you have? How much do you earn? What do you take home? And what do you spend against that? And, once people start, doing that balance sheet, so to speak, sometimes they realize they have a lot more, and sometimes they realize they don't have as much as they thought. And then dividing a household into two, they would have even less.
It's interesting that you point out when the finances go south, oftentimes the relationship does now. People following this show and people know me know that my dad worked in the movie theaters in Stamford, Connecticut, where I grew up, and I got to see a lot of movies. I got to see a lot of movies for free. I got interested in movies. I have a very good friend, Lou Sabini, in Stamford, who is a film historian. I am not Lou Sabini. I am Tony DeAngelo, but I will recount one movie called The Best Years of Our Lives. It was made in 1945, and it's a really, really good movie, and it's really heavy, and it talks about servicemen returning from the war. Dana Andrews, the handsome character actor of the day, is married to Virginia Mayo, who is this gorgeous blonde goddess. And it was one of these like shotgun marriages. It was romantic to do at the time, and he returned from the war, and she was obviously getting into the glamour thing of, hey, I'm married to a flyer. And they're going out night after night after night upon his return. And finally, he runs out of money. He comes in one day with a box of groceries, and she leaves him. It's like...
Well, that still happens today. We've had this discussion before about maintaining your identity, whether you're the woman or the man in the relationship, if you're the, non-earning spouse or the person, at home raising the children and not, advancing your career, bringing money, and we've had this discussion before that somehow that loss of identity or income then sort of translates into this, well, it's all up to you, money, wage earner, to provide for everything I want. And sometimes those wants are very unrealistic, or they don't coincide with the income that's actually in the household, and there seems to be a lot of discontent, and people seem to build their relationships around this financial need instead of around, the bedrock of a relationship between two people where there is love, trust, respect, honor, dignity, where you're a union and a partnership that help each other and support each other with your goals and dreams that, you're looking to accomplish in life, which is more than going to, a store and buy the latest, greatest fashion, whatever it is, or that fast car, depending on whatever your passion is. But it just seems to be that whenever money is less in a relationship, the relationship seems to start to fall apart. And, I always say to keep a level playing field, both partners in a relationship should keep something to themselves about themselves, their identity, their work, their career, so they can keep contributing to the relationship, not just financially, but emotionally too. So when you have both going on both ends, you have a better balance, and people are less likely to just, jump ship and run. Marriage is for the long haul. It's a work in progress, so to speak. So unfortunately, we live in an age now with, all this, media between the Twitter, the Facebook, the Instagram, where everything's so instantaneously. We live in a disposable society where people don't want to work for what they really want. So if you have the love of your life, I would say hold on to them dearly. And again, before jumping ship, you need to really do an exercise in, what you're about and what you have before walking away. So once you realize how much money you need to live, and if it's a lot more than you actually have, or that you can determine, you need to figure out where the money is coming from, and where it's coming from, if your spouse is a wage earner, which is the second question, is do I know what my spouse earns and where the money's deposited? So
Right.
if you're a partner relationship who, lives off the credit card and does all the grocery shopping that way and really never sees the bank account, maybe that income is never put into a joint account and you have no access to it. So you need to find out where that income comes from, because before you can walk away from your partner, if you want what might be rightfully yours under the law of the state in which you live, you need to know where it is and how much it is. And a tax return is a good place to look.
Now, you mentioned here...
People don't think that way. That's how you see what the income is for your family, for you and your spouse. And you get a better picture.
And you mentioned here, and this was in the wonderful notes that you sent me, look at your tax returns. If you don't have them and you can't find them, call your accountant. If you don't have an accountant, contact the IRS and get copies. Now, there comes a moment where both parties are signing an income tax return. Is that a good point to say, May I have a copy of this, or where is this? Because I want to study it. And sometimes does that cause an issue in the marriage?
Well, I think that sometimes that's a huge red flag if your partner who's asking you to sign the return doesn't want you to see what the earnings are. I mean, I have known couples where one is a doctor and she's a wage earner doing something else, and he always sort of like covered up what he earned. And she would just sign away, and then one day she decided to look at the tax return. She knew where they were in the house, and she was joyfully shocked to see that his income was, beyond what she could even have imagined, but it really shouldn't have been a secret. So, yes, if you're signing a tax return and putting your name on it, you should have a copy. You should see what the earnings are. There used to be a thing, and it still does exist, but it's much more difficult, called the innocent spouse.
Right.
Where, way back, many, many years ago, it was generally the man. He would cover up what the earnings were, and the wife would just sign away on the return, and she would get the benefit of the innocent spouse because she was so controlled by the man. Maybe
Naive.
she wasn't educated. Well, we don't really have that as much today.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really get away so much with the innocent spouse with the IRS if you don't really know what your earnings were, or in a court of law, you can't say, oh, well, I really didn't know. There's so many avenues to find out what the earnings are, and you should know. I mean, what you can do is, if there are no copies in the house, if, let's say, you don't have an account, maybe your spouse does it at H&R Block or wherever they do it, you can literally call up the IRS. It's a very simple form. You fill it out with your Social Security number and your spouse's Social Security number, and they send you a duplicate copy. No questions asked.
Yeah, because you're the party in question. It's.
And you're on it. As long as you're on it. It's usually whoever the primary wage earner will be the taxpayer, and you will be the partner or spouse. Your spouse on the return. You fill it out, and you will get duplicate copies. So the IRS is very happy to give you copies of your tax return.
Now it's interesting.
It's really, really important.
And it's interesting to me that, at least in the tenor of this discussion, it seems that so many divorces or contemplations of divorces are, I imagine infidelity is still a cause, but it would seem that financial issues really kind of rule the day.
I think they do rule the day. I mean, when you talk about infidelity, there are times when infidelity, where maybe someone has had a significant other outside the marriage for a lengthy part of the marriage, and what will happen there, depending on the state in which you live, particularly somewhere like New York, is if you've expended marital funds on an affair outside the marriage, well, that marital money would have been, the spouse that's been offended would have been entitled to at least half of that money or some portion thereof. So that part of the finances it's important to know where your money's going. I mean, there are actually states where if someone has an infidelity, they automatically award the offended spouse more money just because.
Right.
So the finance issue, it does become about money because let's say people grow apart. A lot of people get married in their 20s. They don't really know who they are. They haven't found themselves, and they find themselves in their 40s, and they've just grown apart. They may not even dislike each other. They're just on different paths, and they want to separate, and that's okay too. But they often find out that what they had together as a unit, once they split it up, if there are children, they don't have enough. They don't have enough to have two households.
Well, and I was just I was chatting here with the kids, my producers, before we went on, and I said, to me, and you're the expert. I've just been an observer, and what I've observed has not been pleasant to me. That many people think, as far as divorces, that they can somehow glue Humpty Dumpty back together again. Where I've always kind of thought and told them, hey, you can't really do that. It's time to make a scrambled egg. And can you live with the scrambled egg?
Well, you happen to be right. I mean, that's why it's so important before you think of filing for divorce. You really figure out the best plan of action for you and your family. I mean, I'm always a fan of saying wherever you go, there you are. So if you're not happy with the situation you're in, when you get to the next port, starts with you, with the person you are. And this brings in, like, we're talking about the finances, and we've discussed this in prior shows about knowing your credit history. And if you have your own credit, and finding out if you're, like, considered a person in the grown-up world, and knowing if you can rent an apartment, buy a home, get a mortgage, get a house, get a credit card. Because in order for you to live on your own, you have to be a grown-up. And even if your, spouse has a lot of money that can get divided between the two of you, at some point you still need to be a grown-up in, your own life, and especially as a role model if there are children. Most people don't have that much money where they can, especially after the economy went bust, where they can divide, walk away, and still live in these, beautiful homes that we've seen, and, eat all these dinners out and do all these extra activities with children. They find they have to really cut back. So,
Right.
It's really important to know about what you have, what your spouse has, what you have as a couple, and really think about the 5-year plan, not the 5-month plan, because maybe there's been an infidelity, so now you're angry and you're hurt. So you just want out, or you want to get back at them. But 5 years from now, the mistakes you made early on will be very costly. And it costs not just you, but it costs your entire family. So it's important to plan and have a strategy. And again, once you have all this information, you level the playing field, and maybe you don't leave, maybe you rebuild.
Well, you mentioned something actually in your notes that I was reading, the whole thing about financial statements, and watch the statements coming in. And so much, as I think of this today, I would have estates going back, 30 years, and I would have elderly grieving widows like, what do? I don't understand. Where is all? And I would tell them, Mrs. Chase, just take every statement that comes in, make a pile in the corner, we'll go through it when I arrive. Now, today, we have so much stuff that's online, kept on smartphones, electronic banking, and what does one do in that situation when everything, this guy is like this doctor you're describing, he's really slick, and he's got all these really neat passwords, and he's keeping everything from view. What does one do in that situation?
Well, it is a huge problem. So if your spouse won't give you the passwords to the investment accounts that are online, you know where they are. You know the houses that are holding them and the banks that are holding them.
Right.
Then what will happen is, if you know this already, this is a red flag, and I can tell you this will not be an amicable separation. And what will happen is all of those investment houses that have the portfolio that may or may not be in joint names, or the bank accounts, what will happen is your lawyer will end up getting a subpoena and getting those records for you. But that is an alert to you that if your spouse is not willing to share with you financial information, and the people I'm talking about have been together for 30 years, so if after 30 years your spouse is not willing to share with you that financial information, then they're hiding something. And you really should be concerned, because remember, as we get older, young people think you need money when they're young. Oh, no. You need the money as you get older, and maybe you want to retire, or you get sick or disabled. It's not when you're young when you're able to work and put it away. So it becomes a really big concern. So if two people are not completely honest, now they may have separate accounts and then a joint account, but if there's not enough in that joint account and the passwords aren't shared and you can't get them, then you at least have to know where the money is kept, whether it's a JP Morgan Chase, or a Merrill Lynch, or wherever the money is kept. You should at least have the names of all of that. You should have the social security number and date of birth of your spouse, because if you are going to head for a separation, then your lawyer, through what's called discovery of financials, will get to the bottom of it, and the paper trail will get created, and that's where the legal fees start to come in. And you hope to avoid all of that, but again, if you have someone that's not willing to share that information and you're with them a long time, that's a huge red flag. Would you say?
I would agree. Now, one of the things, you did mention, and actually this will be point number 4, and we've got about 3 before the break, is I'm going to create a scenario here. You know, husband sitting at the table, wife comes in, parks the SUV, takes the groceries in, the kids kind of wander in, do whatever, and looks at the wife and says, you know, I've been thinking about it and I want a divorce. Bang, you know, the groceries end up on the floor, the kids are like screaming, and you know, what's the 911 there? What should one do if that happens?
Well, I always say cease and desist when caught off guard or faced with what I call an attack, especially in front of children. I think the first thing you do there is set everything aside and say, we're going to have to talk about this when the children are not in the house. I think that's the very first thing you do. And then when you have a quiet time, I think you hear out your spouse and you have to be calm, cool, and collected. Then, afterward, the first thing you do is if your spouse tells you they want a divorce, you're going to consult a lawyer. And you're going to consult a lawyer in the county in which you live, in the state in which you live. Because you want somebody local to the courts where your divorce might end up if it is not going to be friendly or amicable. And you can find those lawyers through the Bar Association, which is online. There's a lot of resources. And what you do is you can consult with 1, 2, I would say maximum 3. Most attorneys will give you a free consultation. Some is, you know, little as 15 minutes, some as much as an hour. I always say you should be able to try on the shoes before you walk out the door. Make sure you ask if there's a charge for the consultation. If there is, maybe you should move to lawyer number 2 on the list. Like I said, most attorneys will give you a free consultation and give you a general idea of what they think about your situation. And then you want to find a personality match, which we'll discuss later about choosing the right lawyer. And once you consult with the lawyer, I would then say open your own bank account immediately, and not in the same bank where your spouse banks or where you have a joint bank account. Go to the bank at the other end of the street. Okay, you don't need to be running into someone that wants to divorce you. Okay, and once you open up your own bank account, you also want to open up a P.O. box with a street address. If you're going to be getting physical statements, which most banks require you to do initially before you can go online, and when you have a P.O. box with a street address, you can then send other mail there that you may now not want to go to your residence where you're currently living.
Well understood, and what I'm going to do is stick a pin here, and we're going to come back in a moment. There's so many ways we can take this discussion, and it's not a fun discussion, as we said, but it's incredibly valuable information and incredibly fascinating, and can really help someone out there either watching or listening. So, Leslie, if okay, you sit tight for a moment, and we will be back to you. And this is Tony DeAngelo and Leslie Hausner Montanile. Ask Leslie the Lawyer here on Connecticut Morning, and we can never find the time, but we're going to find it for you when we come back right after this.